Hello and welcome to today's British Plastics Federation webinar on marine litter prevention, progress and monitoring. Firstly, we would like to say a special thank you to our sponsor PlasticsEurope. My name is Grace Nolan and I'm the editor of British Plastics and Rubber magazine, and I will be chairing today's event. Before we get started, I would like to mention that the biographies of all the speakers have been sent to you via email prior to this webinar. And if you have any questions to ask the speakers, please do feel free to type them in the question tab on your toolbar. You can do this at any point and we will look to get through as many questions as possible. Any questions that we do not have time to answer will be sent to the relevant speaker and answered offline. The recording of this webinar will also be sent to you following the end, as well as the slides with it. For this webinar, in partnership with PlasticsEurope, the British Plastics Federation is bringing together top experts and practitioners in marine litter. The BPF and PlasticsEurope are engaged in a wide collaboration with stakeholders across the supply chain on solving marine litter issues, including on Operation Clean Sweep, but also related to circularity initiatives, eco-design for plastic products. This afternoon, we will explore the progress that has been made, ways to prevent plastic waste from entering seas and rivers, as well as methods of monitoring. As such, this event is vital to those wanting an overview of the latest research and initiatives. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker. We are joined by Dr. Julius Piercy from Defra, who will speak on government perspective on marine litter.
Thank you very much for the introductions. So I'd like to start by apologising, which is never a good way to start a presentation, but I'm going to have to do what seemed to be quite a popular trend at the moment in government, and as we go through the slides, since they are being operated at another end, I'm going to have to go through and say next slide, please, as we go through. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the issue of marine litter is obviously very prominent in the public view. Just last week, there was a publication produced that showed that the majority of citizens across England and Wales in the survey highlighted marine litter as being the biggest threat to the marine environment. Obviously, we know it's not, and that there are things like climate change which probably take precedence. But this really does highlight how big an issue this is in the public mind. I just want to start with a few stats, really, to just paint the picture of what's happening. So, 60 to 80% of marine litter is made up of plastics. There's a lot of plastics that enters the ocean every year. A report in 2015 estimated this to be between sort of 5 and 13 million. Plastic flow into the ocean, though, could actually triple between 2016 and 2040. So that's a pretty big increase on the expected flow into the ocean if we don't do anything. So the majority of this plastic is actually coming from land-based sources, and that's not to say that sea-based sources aren't important, and I'll touch on that a little bit later on. In terms of what we see, we tend to see a lot about the plastic that's on the beaches or on the surface, but the evidence at the moment sort of suggests this is a small proportion of the plastics that's actually out there, with about 5% washing up on beaches, about 1% on the sea surface, and a huge 94% ending up on the seabed. And so there's a lot of plastic that plastic pollution that we need to deal with, and there's a lot of action that's happening globally, but even with all the current global commitments that are in place, science estimates that we'd only reduce the plastic flow into the ocean by about 7% compared to business as usual, and this by 2040. So what I said before, where we've got this tripling of plastic between 2016 and 2040, a reduction of 77% compared to this figure is actually still an increase. So hopefully that's given you a context of how big this issue is and in what direction we're actually traveling at the moment. Next slide, please. So there are a number of frameworks that we work towards, and I'm going to be speaking about UK frameworks, but in many places these are devolved matters, and I will be speaking around England only frameworks. For example, in the 25-year environment plan, which is our biggest overarching strategy, there are elements which are both UK government based, but also quite a lot that's devolved, especially because nearly all matters around resources and waste are devolved issues. So the 25-year environment plan, the litter strategy for England, the UK marine strategy, and most recently the resources and waste strategy for England. And I'd like to try and highlight a couple of the commitments that we have in that were of relevance to the issue of plastic pollution. So first of all, the ambition to have zero avoidable waste by 2050, and working towards all plastic packaging placed on the market being recyclable, reusable or compostable by 2025. So I probably don't need to say that these are fairly ambitious commitments that we are holding ourselves to, and we are looking at every way we can to deliver these. A consistent set of recyclable materials collected from all households and businesses. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the fact that you're in one local authority and you have one set of materials to put in your blue bin. If you live in a blue bin area, it might be a different colour. Then, and your neighbour in a different local authority actually has a different set of materials that they can put in their recycling bin. We've committed to a deposit return scheme for drinks containers and extended producer responsibility for packaging with a full net cost recovery, because we already had an extended producer responsibility for packaging in place before. But there are also other future producer responsibility schemes we are considering. Next slide, please. So you will see from this slide, I've highlighted the British-Irish Council because I thought this was a good place to start, where we can actually start looking at some of the baseline issues that we're considering across all UK administrations. The British-Irish Council includes all UK administrations plus the Republic of Ireland and the Crown dependencies, and it sort of sets a baseline of some of the issues we're working on together. And one of those is working on the collection and recycling of end-of-life fishing gear with industry. The second one is reducing plastic pellet loss across the supply chain. And I know we're going to be talking about this in a talk shortly by Adela, but I just wanted to highlight this issue partly because I'm currently involved in the coordinating some responses to an incident that has happened across off the coast of Sri Lanka. This is the image here is of the Express Pearl, which is now caught fire and sunk to the bottom. But before it did so, it had a few containers come loose and fall into the sea. These containers contained lots of plastic pellets, and these plastic pellets have gone to the shore. And in some places, we're talking about 2 feet deep in plastic pellets, and they're pretty difficult to clean up. So we don't have many instances where we've had major cleanup operations of this scale on plastic pellets, but it does drive home the importance of ensuring that pollution from pellets is minimized, because once they are in the environment, they are incredibly difficult to remove. And then we have a commitment to share and improve some of the educational material for young people, and also to explore sort of share and improve those modules for professional fisheries, so that it's included in their training material to highlight the environmental, economic and social costs of marine litter. Next slide, please. So a quick spotlight on end-of-life fishing gear. So if you hadn't heard of this, so end-of-life, basically we're facing a problem in the marine environment from ghost gear, which is fishing gear that has been abandoned, lost or discarded. And this is, can entangle and kill marine life and is possibly one of the forms of plastic that is most harmful to the environment. In the UK, fishing related litter is nearly always amongst the most common types of litter, both on seafloor surveys, but also on beaches. And I'm not saying that end-of-life fishing gear is going to, improving our management of end-of-life fishing gear is going to solve the problem of ghost gear at all, but it is another waste stream that at the moment isn't handled correctly, and is usually either goes to landfill or is kept in storage, because actually there's quite a high cost to disposing and recycling it, because gear tends to be made of lots of different materials, different polymers, and can also be sort of heavily fouled with marine organisms. So in the Resources and Waste Strategy for England, we did commit to consult on measures such as an extended producer responsibility on fishing gear and textiles, and with a priority to consult on those two specifically by 2022. Next slide, please. Now, this is a very busy slide, and so I'm not going to go through all of this, but it is basically to highlight that there is a lot that's happening internationally. So there's quite a mixture of different areas that are tackling marine litter, different countries, different groupings, regional, national, international. There's a lot going on, so there's a huge interest in the issue at the moment, which is why at the UN Environment Assembly there are a number of countries that are calling for a new global agreement on plastic pollution, and the UK does support starting negotiations on a new global agreement at the next Environment Assembly in February 2022. G7 and G20, also a quick nod to this because they have a long history of trying to drive ambitious action on marine litter as well. And obviously we had the G7 summit just this weekend, where there were some further commitments made as well on addressing marine litter, including ghost fishing gear. I'm not going to go into international programs and initiatives because actually I'm going to cover a few of those separately in the following slides, but I've listed here a few of the ones that we are involved in. Next slide, please. So the Commonwealth Clean Ocean Alliance was launched in 2018 by the UK and Vanuatu during the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and this initiative has grown really popular amongst the Commonwealth countries. 34 out of the 54, last time I counted, Commonwealth countries support this initiative, and they ask members to commit to a number of different ambitions, which include taking steps to eliminate all avoidable single-use plastic waste, ban of the sale and manufacture of microbeads in personal care products by 2021. There's an error in that slide, and a significant reduction of single-use plastic carrier bags by 2021 as well. Next slide, please. And the Global Plastics Action Partnership it's a public-private partnership established by the World Economic Forum, also in 2018, around the same time that the Commonwealth Clean Ocean Alliance was launched, and the UK has supported it since its launch, together with Canada and corporate partners such as Nestlé and Coca-Cola. It currently operates in 4 countries: Indonesia, Ghana, Vietnam, and Nigeria, although in the first 3, it has launched national plastic action partnerships, but there isn't one yet in place in Nigeria, but I'm hoping that is to come soon. And the 6 main areas of focus are outlined there on that slide. So informing policy, unlocking financing, transforming behavior, boosting innovation, harmonizing metrics, and promoting inclusivity. And they're an excellent demonstration of how the public and the private sector can work together to address some of the issues around plastic pollution. Next slide, please. So this is another initiative that the UK has delivered through CFAS, and the Commonwealth Litter Programme operates in a number of developing countries, and it supports them in trying to combat land-based sources of marine litter, combat sea-based sources of marine litter, different things like what action can be taken to remove the litter, education and science, outreach, and these sorts of things include, gathering data to understand what the main issues are, developing capability within the countries to actually either monitor or assess their marine litter issue. Next slide, please. And this is just a very quick slide to sort of say where we operate. I mean, in terms of regions, we operate very broadly, widely around the world with the programs that are currently in place. There's, I'm not going to list them, but you can see from the table that includes the Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia and East Asia, and the Pacific as our main points of focus. Next slide, please. And yes, at the weekend we had the announcement of the launch of the Blue Planet Fund. And the Blue Planet Fund is a £500 million fund that has been put in place to protect and enhance the marine ecosystems through conservation and sustainable management of ocean resources. And it also has poverty alleviation at its centre, because it does come from a UK aid budgets. So 4 key themes under this: climate change, biodiversity, sustainable seafood, and then most importantly to this audience is marine pollution, which does include marine litter as well. So there's a lot happening in government, there's a lot happening around the world at the moment on marine litter. Apologies, that was a very quick rush through all the things we're trying to do, and I've missed out many in the interest of time, but I'm happy to take any questions. Or I should have said, next slide, please. So any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julius. Yes, if you've got any questions, continue to send them in the text box. I think a main question that has been asked is, how can a company get involved in these programs and initiatives and figure out which one is the right fit for them?
So the answer to that is probably it depends. It depends on what type of company you are. It depends on whether you operate nationally or internationally, but there are certainly some there are certainly some initiatives that, such as the Global Plastics Action Partnership, where the involvement of industry is really in partnership. So getting involved via the World Economic Forum, for example, is a good place to start. If you are working domestically, then I work on marine litter mostly, so less so on our resource and waste side. But it is always good to get in touch, either through representatives that you may have, such as on the British Plastics Federation, or directly with us. We will be happy to consider where your program fits and what kind of support it could provide in the context. Obviously, there are formal consultations, another way to get involved, and there are some funding programs as well on plastics through Innovate UK, for example. So there are quite a range of different ways, and it really rather depends on what your company works on and where it operates.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a one fits everything, is it? It's kind of tailored to that company. You mentioned that you're pushing kind of educational materials. How do you plan on distributing these?
That's an excellent question, and something we are working towards, because it again, it's another one that depends. And so there are in where we've done some of these things internationally, produced educational materials in countries and translated those into the languages used. And some of these have been incorporated, for example, in the national curriculum. That doesn't tend to be the same here. There are different forms of education that we can look at as well. It's not just schools. There are outreach events. There are other programs that educational professionals can access. There's things like the Scouts and Girl Guides associations, which have also a very hands-on approach and interest in raising awareness and education on these issues. So not very helpful answer there either, I'm afraid. But yes, I'm not going to elaborate too much further on that. Again, it depends, and we haven't worked out in every single case how we're going to get the educational material across.
It's such a broad topic. It's not a one-word answer, is it really? It's just about getting the education kind of out there to the consumer, and how we can use that as a resource.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Julius, for your presentation and time. If we haven't managed to answer your questions, then please do continue to leave them in the box, and Julius will be able to answer them after the webinar individually. So next up, we have Stefania Di Vito from Legambiente, who will speak on the Life Blue Lakes project.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. I think I shared my screen. It's right.
Yeah, it's shared, but it's not full screen yet, Stefania.
Okay,
Perfect.
now it is.
Absolutely
Okay.
perfect. Tutto bene.
Okay, so good morning, I'm Stefania Di Vito from the Scientific Office of Legambiente. Today I will present you our Life Blue Lakes project that aim at tackles the problem of microplastics in lakes through a set of governance, training, information, and awareness actions addressed to institution relevant stakeholders and citizens. The project is co-financed by the European Commission through the LIFE program and PlasticsEurope. Partners, Legambiente is the main beneficiary, but other partners are ARPA Umbria, that is the regional agency for the environmental protection for Umbria region, the Basin Authority of the Central Apennine District, the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, ENEA, the Polytechnic University of Marche, for Italy, while for Germany we have Global Nature Fund and the International Lake Constance Foundation. Main project sections will be held in Garda, Bracciano and Trasimeno lakes in Italy, and in Constance and Chiemsee lakes in Germany. There are lakes characterized by, of course, tourism, presence of tourists, and they are all nature conservation area. But in some cases, for example, for Bracciano Lake, that is near Rome, we have a drinking water reservoir. And also in another case, the Garda Lake is used also for agricultural irrigation. The project addresses the theme of microplastics that are intended like all the plastic fragments smaller than 5 millimeters. Microplastics has two main sources, are divided in two main big groups. We call the primary microplastics is if they reach the environment in microplastic form, in a microscopic form, while we speak about secondary microplastic if they came from the fragmentation of bigger waste already dispersed in the environment. Sources of primary microplastic you can see in the screen. There are like the tires, city dust, plastic pellets, of course, personal care products, and so on. Now a little promotional video of the project. Okay. Basically, the project is based on the consciousness that microplastics issue is well studied in the marine environment, but we know there is the awareness that even the inland waters are not immune to this phenomenon. But there are not so much studies. In fact, in this regard, there are several gaps. For example, there are no good and shared data as a standard for sampling, processing, and analysis of the samples are missing for the inland water, for lakes in particular. So it's missing also spatial data and temporal trends. Often the studies are directed only to microplastics and not to meso and macroparticles. And very little is known about the effects of microplastics in freshwater organisms. So the main objective of the Blue Lakes are to support the local administration in Italian and German lakes areas and enhancing the engagement of local economic entities by a participatory process to draft the lake paper. I will tell you more about this. To reduce microplastics release from wastewater treatment plants, developing a technical protocol and training operators, to cooperate with relevant companies to find out and develop solutions to reduce and prevent further primary microplastic loads, to raise public awareness and promoting behavior to prevent plastic waste, and to enhance existing regulatory framework, as for example, we can say that microplastics are not considered as an indicator of good environmental status for fresh water within the Water Framework Directive. Now I'd like to tell you more about some core action of the project. The first one is the campaign for local authorities and stakeholders. As this action foresees, as I said before, a participatory process addressing municipality stakeholders, including socio-economic actors like industries, farmers, touristic operators, recreational sectors, and residents of the main Italian and German lakes for the drafting the lake paper. This lake paper is a voluntary tool in line with the European strategy for plastic in the circular economy that will suggest plastic waste treatment, discharge limits, monitoring programs, suggest raising awareness initiatives, and so on. And this is the process that we are that we create, that that we create and that we are pursuing in this moment. We started with the engaging webinars to present the project, to share good practices and illustrate the action. Then we create an online platform on which the stakeholders can contribute to the draft of the lake paper. And then we are organizing in this period the workshops dedicated to special category of stakeholders, public bodies, business activities, and specific associations to tell them about the lake paper. And then there will be a final workshop for each lake, in which will be presented the final draft of the lake paper. The second correction I'd like to tell you is it's about the scientific part of the project. Is dedicated to find the monitoring protocol. As I said before, it is missing for lakes, and this action is in pilot on Trasimeno and Bracciano lakes, that are two lakes of the central Italy. To find a monitoring protocol it's important because efficient standardized monitoring programs are currently not available at the EU level, and it's important to propose and pursuing regulatory actions like the lake paper. So as you can see, we perform monitoring sampling in all the season. Now I have some very small video to show you the phases of the monitoring. There are these two instruments. The one on the left is the manta troll that is used also in the marine environment. He has a net that filter waters, and these nets are trolling in the water. They are filtering the surface water. For linear transects that are fixed, we have a fixed length, a fixed speed of the boat, and the volume of water filtered by the net is calculated. The water is filtered by a net that is 330 micrometers, and at the end of the net there is a collector that collected the sample that you can see on the screen. Then there is a laboratory phase in which the technician can set the shape, colors, and polymer of each fragments of microplastics. The sampling is not only on the surface of the lakes, but is only also on beaches. This is, for example, the sampling of the beaches. They are sampling. The technicians are sampling five samples. They perform the simple course of the beach at different distances from the water, and then they collect the sediments in the boxes that will be analyzed in the laboratory.
Two-minute
At the
warning,
end,
Stefania.
yeah. What?
We've got 2 minutes left on this presentation, just to let you know.
Okay. At the end, the protocol will be disseminated to the relevant competent authorities. The other correction is for the sewage treatment plant, because there is a really strong relationship between the presence of microplastic in urban wastewater treatment plants due to the ineffectiveness removing microfibers from urban wastewater. And this action foresees the testing technological solution to be applied to the sewage treatment plants, improving the wastewater treatment process without changing plant equipments, of course, in order to reduce the input of microplastic on lake basins. Finally, there is a campaign for companies dedicated to, in particular, to cosmetic, outdoor clothing, rubber tire production companies, because microplastics are intentionally added to certain products and are relatively easy to prevent. In fact, the EU Commission started to restrict the use of intentionally added microplastics. Some companies have been contacted, within the project, the Global Nature Fund, that is is pursuing this action, create 3 position paper for 3 business sector to motivate them to eliminate microplastic from products. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that insightful presentation. I think we've got time for one question, which we've been getting a lot of questions in, which is great. Please do continue to send them in. So we have one: what are the future hopes for the project? Do you have plans to expand the different pilot projects?
Can you repeat? Sorry.
Yes. What are your future hopes for the pilot projects? Are you looking to expand them?
It depends on the action, but of course, once stated some, for example, Lake's paper or the monitoring protocol, we will enlarge to other lakes community, of course, in Italy, in Germany, and then thanks to the network that we are building with other projects, we hope to share the findings and the results of the project.
Great, thank you, Stefania. Any other questions you'll be able to answer offline, won't you? So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Adela Putinelu from the British Plastics Federation, who will be speaking on Operation Clean Sweep and Pallet Loss Prevention Standard PPAS 510.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining this event today. I work for the British Plastics Federation as Senior Sustainability Executive and working on one of our key sustainability initiatives, which is Operation Clean Sweep. I'm going to talk to you about that today and also introduce some future plans regarding a pellet loss prevention standard. Plastic pellet pollution. So what is the problem really? The issue is that these tiny bits of plastic pellets, which are really the building blocks of all the plastic products we find on the market, there are issues with the management throughout the supply chain in the sense that at any part of the supply chain, these can be lost into the environment. A key issue really here is prevention, because once these pellets are out there in the environment, it's very, very difficult to recover them. Whether we're talking about soil, sea, beaches, it's very difficult to get them back. And so one of the key areas that we're working on is on preventing any losses from happening in the first place. For companies, it's a really important issue because there are huge reputational risks, including litigation involved. So for example, in the US, a couple of years ago, we have seen a company that has been fined quite a huge fine, and the lawsuit in case was brought by a private citizens group. So you can see how it can get to a really kind of high magnitude of risks in this area. Looking a little bit at what we mean by plastic pellets, so it's a bit of a catch-all term. It also refers to other types of raw materials such as powders or flake, and it's really a feedstock that is used in all of the molding and extrusion operations to put together all the plastic products that we use in our everyday life. I'll talk you through a little bit about some of the quantification studies that we have in this area. So this is from a study for the European Commission, and it really shows estimates at different stages of the supply chain, and you can see how the raw material can escape from all of these different actors within the supply chain. So we talk about producers, recyclers, converters in the plastics industry, but really also very important in this regard are also intermediary facilities. So things like transport, shipping, logistics, all of these actors share a common responsibility to put in place best practice to avoid any spills and leakage from taking place in the first stage. So you can see also that the quantifications have very, very different ranges. So here we can see from an upper range of 17,000 tons going to 170,000 tons per year. This only looks at European countries as well. So whether we look at the upper range or the lower range, really the quantities are quite big and very, very concerning. Also to bear in mind, very importantly, when we look at the global quantities of primary microplastics going into the world oceans, you can see that compared to other sources, plastic pellets are actually quite a small source. That doesn't mean it's not very important. It's an issue that can be tackled at source, and it's an issue that is quite easy to deal with compared with other sources, but it's important to bear in mind that when we think of global quantities, plastic pellets are quite small compared to other sources, and this is really just primary microplastics shown in here. Operation Clean Sweep is a program that the BPF runs in the UK since 2009. It has originated with the US Trade Association, and you can see here different members across the globe, different countries that roll out this program. A little bit about the progress to date in the UK. So we have seen a lot of success in rolling out this program. At the moment, there are 245 companies that have registered to the Operation Clean Sweep program. These companies sit at different points of the supply chain, ranging from producers, converters, but also logistics, transport, and port authorities. This number of 245 companies represents about 65% of the total raw material that is processed in the UK. So it's covering quite a big part of the entire supply chain. And also there are different, a number of 330 different industrial sites that have signed up. So for example, companies can have one site or they can have 10 different sites that they register into the program. As I've mentioned before, one of the most important parts of dealing with this pollution problem is prevention. So companies initially, when they registered to the program, they pledged to work towards zero plastic pellet loss. And the principles are, first of all, avoiding it, and then in case spills do occur, to have all the necessary cleanup equipment to make sure that the pellets are cleaned immediately and there's no loss happening outside of the boundaries of the industrial sites. To make this happen and to help companies implement this program, we are offering a range of different resources. These are employee training tools, an implementation manual that's quite comprehensive, different signposting resources, supply chain letters that companies can use to raise awareness with the other partners in the supply chain. To give you an idea of how implementation looks on the ground, so one of the key parts of the program is the site audit and the risk assessment procedure. So companies need to put together a risk assessment that looks at what are the key transfer points, what are the potential spill areas, determine the cause of this, also work towards determining potential pathways that can lead a spill to become a loss to the environment. So spills, we normally refer to accidental spills that might happen as part of an industrial site, but a loss is really the problem where a spill can get into the outside boundaries of the factories of the site, and that is really a loss to the environment. So the idea is to have equipment in place to make sure that spills do not get into a loss into the environment. And you can see in these images some of the examples and what can be done on the ground. So really making sure that all the drain covers are properly protected. You can see in the right image, we have a silo port there. So that's where you connect and you transport the pellets into the silo, and having that entire area protected and enclosed is very, very important, so that you make sure that no loss happens outside of that space. I've talked about the supply chain approach, so it's really very important to bear in mind that the supply chain is quite complex, and there are a lot of very, very different actors along the supply chain that bear responsibility to implement best practice. And these actors, some of them have the full custody of the material that they work with, but others don't. It doesn't really matter as long as, the risks are shared and the responsibility is shared as well. So everybody really that uses plastic pellets in any way, whether that's for converting purposes or that's just purely transporting it on behalf of other companies, all of these different actors have a very important part to play. A little bit of future plans. So we have been working for a while now with the British Standards Institution, who is coordinating the development of an international standard. The standard is really meant to build on all of the experience around Operation Clean Sweep and getting all of this different guidance into one document. Very importantly, this is a joint effort. We have been working in collaboration with a number of stakeholders, including the Scottish Government, a group of institutional investors led by the Investor Forum, as well as Fauna and Flora International, and really a joint effort to put together this standard, which will be published in the coming months by the British Standards Institute. One of the key reasons why we did this is to really make sure that there's a standardized, a harmonized way in which companies can implement this best practice guidelines. And it's also a key kind of measure to help companies verify the implementation of these procedures, and building on all of the success with Operation Clean Sweep, we hope and we believe that the standard will be really instrumental in solving this plastic pellet pollution problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adela. It was great to hear more about that standardisation. Let's have a look at what questions we've got coming in. So how important is the collaboration in the supply chain in order to kind of make these like the pellet loss prevention standard successful?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think collaboration along the supply chain and among the different stakeholders involved is very, very important. We have already built up a lot of experience in running Operation Clean Sweep, and we hope to leverage this for the rollout of this standard as well. So, for example, all of the things that I've talked about in Operation Clean Sweep with regards to the resources, they're all offered for free to anybody who is interested to join the program. So that's really important. And as I've mentioned before, I think really it's really important to understand that all of the different actors that I've mentioned before in the supply chain who have custody of the material and those who don't as well understand the risks and put in place measures to contain the loss of pellets.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. And your details are on screen so people can get in contact with you, and any other questions you'll be available offline. Our next speaker is Jeremy Fouriau from PlasticsEurope, who will be speaking on Operation Clean Sweep and the European Pellet Loss Prevention Certification Scheme.
Hello everyone, I hope you can all hear me well. So as it was mentioned before, I'm Jeremy Fouriau, working for PlasticsEurope, Environmental Affairs Manager. And today I will make a presentation around Operation Clean Sweep at European level. So a bit to supplement what my colleague from BPF, Adela, has said. And I will show you now on the next slides what I have prepared for you. So I will not spend too much time because it has already been quite already said, but as the plastics industry, we are quite aware that the pellet loss is depending on the studies, of course, and here it's a Eunomia study, quite well known and used by authorities. The pellet loss is one of the largest sources of primary microplastics. It really depends, as Adela said, on studies. On this one, at least you can see that it's the second largest source of primary microplastics. And as I said, as the plastics industry, and together with our value chain, we have a direct control over this source of microplastics. So that's why we are so active on the issue in order to reduce our impact into the environment. Just to show you also the value chain that we've been talking about, when we say, the full plastic value chain has an impact on pellet loss. We're not talking only about plastic producers, but also any companies handling plastic pellets whatsoever. It goes from the producers, the converters, the transport companies, storage, logistics, but also during the transport by sea, shipping, and so on, and to finish with recyclers. Basically, any companies handling plastic pellets whatsoever should really take care of the material. As you all know, and as we are all convinced, the plastic material is too valuable to end up in the environment. On the next slide, just some pictures to show you in real life what we are talking about, and also to supplement what has been said previously. This is from the port of Antwerp. I went there a couple of years ago, and you can see that on those pics that it's not sand, it's really pellets lying around from the industry, and where I can assure you we have cleaned up, of course, but this is to show you in real life how it can look like. Another place in Spain, in Tarragona, also next to a chemical cluster, you can find also some pellets on the ground, really unacceptable. But again, here in Tarragona, we have also worked together with the industry to make sure that those pictures will not exist in the future, and that industry will take its responsibility to make sure that we contain all our material. A picture that I've taken from FIDRA, and there really encourage you to go to see their website. There, what you can see is that they have a map to monitor the pellet loss issue in Europe. Basically, it's volunteers going around beaches and spotting pellet loss. And as you can see, this is really a global issue at European level. Almost all countries where there have been volunteers looking for pellets, they have found some pellets. So really to show you the scale of the issue. And as a consequence, of course, a bad reputation for the industry, and also, as I was mentioning quite a lot before, very bad for the environment. But here are some also example that you know, it has also consequences on the press if you have to be convinced once again to join the program. The program itself, I will not stay too long on that because Adela has said it already quite a lot, but you know, already since 2014, Plastics Europe has started to promote the OCS program in Europe with the objective of zero pellet loss in the environment. It is really voluntary and free initiative. I insist on that. So any company is free to join the program for no cost. By joining the program, any companies will receive guidance and tools to support the implementation of the measures in order to avoid any pellet loss. You can see also what it means in practice. Joining the OCS program is signing up to the pledge, and you see the 6 points of this OCS pledge. First one is to improve work sites, so really understand the risk analysis on how your work site is built, and look at, you know, the risk areas, map them in order to better understand. Then, of course, once you understand the scale of the issue, you publish internal procedures with the goal of zero pellet loss. You provide your employees at the third step with training and accountability, so everyone knows what to do and how to react to pellet loss on your site or outside your sites. Point 4, of course, once you have implemented all of that, you need to understand how you can improve. So it's really self-assessment, auditing your performance regularly. Point 5, no-brainer at all to comply with the law. And point 6, because as I said, and I started my presentation, the OCS program is all about the full value chain. So not only you, your company signing up to the program, but really encouraging your partners working whether on your site or handling your material in order to pursue the same objective of zero pellet loss. I encourage you to go on the European website of cleansweep.eu for more information about the program. Some example, in addition to what Adela showed, you see here, for instance, production sites, and you see a couple of best practices. It goes for very simple best practices, such as, you know, when employees sees pellets on the floor, that they have the right tools in order to sweep, you know, the pellets to avoid that they escape into the environment. It can be a bit more complex or a bit more intensive, such as kind of best practices to clean the trucks, such as blowing material to blow the pellets out of the truck, so that when they leave your site, they are fully clean. Some other best practices include some sewage filters to prevent the pellets to go away. There are also some protective layer and stronger film packaging, or the forklift sleeves in order to avoid any rips of the packaging and the pellets escaping again in the environment. Those are basic best practices, but it's just to show you that it can be very, very simple ones. And the more, of course, you get to implement the program, the more in details you go, and the more deeper, I would say, you go in the implementation of the program. But again, very accessible to any company. Of course, joining the program, you won't be alone. As I mentioned, as a trade association, Plastics Europe supports its member, but also any company is willing to join the program. And on the European OCS website, you can find a lot of tools to help you in implementing the program. First of all, and Adela mentioned it already, the online manual with many best practices and a kind of a structure in order to implement the program. We have also some activity reports to show it from Plastics Europe, what our members did since 2017 and until 2019, with some reporting on the level of implementation of our members. In addition to that, you can find on the European website some checklists, whether for management or employees, and also some communication tools such as flyers, but also the OCS logo, some samples of newsletter, article, press releases, and also some video in several languages. Last but not least, for transportation companies, we have developed some raising awareness posters that you can also find on requests to Plastics Europe. And the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of tools available, this has been developed together with Cefic and ECTA. It's some instruction for loading and unloading of trucks. So you can find all those documents either on the European website or on request on the website as well. Now, at European level, some uptakes in terms of new signatories. 2020 was really a big year, as you can see. Already since 2017, numbers have exploded. It is due to the big collaboration we have together with BPF, but other plastic trade associations around Europe. And as a result, of course, we have more and more signatories joining the program, being really committed to the plastic pellet loss issue. And for 2020, some latest results, we have more than 1,200 companies and associations having joined the program. Altogether in Europe, it is an increase of plus 70% in 2020. This is the result not only of a big increase in the converter and logistic sector, but also due to the fact that since 2019, Plastics Europe has committed to make all its members OCS members, and since 2019 we have all our members that have signed up to OCS. We have changed our statute, so if a company wants to be a member of Plastics Europe, they have to be OCS member. Also, we have almost all European associations from the plastic value chain that have confirmed their commitment to OCS in 2020. Some, let's say, external context on the pellet loss issue at European and national level. I will not stay too long on that, but just to give you also some sense of what's coming up. So despite some efforts and major efforts from major actors handling pellets, the pellet loss issue remains very high on the agenda at European level and national level. At European level, more and more initiatives are popping up. I will mention the ECA restriction on intentionally added microplastics and this new initiative from the European Commission on unintentionally released microplastics. Both are covering the pellet loss issue. And one very important one is the OSPAR Action 52 for zero pellet loss in the environment. There is a background document, a recommendation, and some guidelines that are coming up, also covering the pellet loss issue. At national level, I will mention France, which is one of the first country in the world to have now a law on pellet loss. So they have published a decree now already early this year on how to tackle the pellet loss issue for France. In the UK, I will not be too extensive on that because Adela covered it already, but there is this development of the BSI pass on pellet loss handling and management. So really a hot issue at the moment. And not only at, let's say, an external level, but also internally, we have rethink a bit the OCS program. We have looked at it and how we could improve it. One of the elements we really wanted to be more proactive on is the transparency. So that's why we have come up with this new solution to pellet loss. It's still OCS, but by 2022, together with the full value chain, we will develop an OCS certification scheme. And this will include several points and measures such as the prioritization of action to minimize pellet loss, normal for a certification scheme. So we are working on some additional guidance, procedures, best practices, performances targets for any companies willing to be OCS certified after 2022, together with some harmonization of the pellet loss prevention practices and the commentary reporting elements for the full value chain. Also, we are developing a bow-tie risk minimization model as a tool to implement risk management at individual facilities, again, for the full value chain, in order to help companies when they join the program, and they do their risk assessment. Not only they do a risk assessment, but also they have a risk minimization model in place in order to always improve. Last but not least, we are developing supporting action in order to enable quantifiable reporting at European sectoral level or at national level. How it will look like, this OCS certification scheme in practice. So together with EUPC, our colleagues from the European converting world, we are leading the development of a transparent auditable scheme for the management of pellet loss in Europe. Other stakeholders from the plastic value chains are involved in the development process, such as transporters, logistics, and recyclers, so that whatever we develop is fitting any companies handling plastic pellets whatsoever. In practice, what does it mean? So in order to be OCS certified, a company handling plastic pellets will be externally audited by a third-party auditor on some minimum requirements that we have developed all together within trade association and companies. In practice, the goal is really to offer a unified solution for the whole Europe for any companies involved in pellet handling in Europe. So it means that whether you're in Bulgaria, whether you're in France, in Belgium, or in the Netherlands, you will be able to access this OCS certification scheme by 2022. All you will have to do is ask your current auditor, external auditors, to perform these external audits. And if you meet the minimum requirements, you will receive the OCS certificate. Last element I want to mention, and I already mentioned on the last slide, but it's an important one, we will include within the OCS certification scheme some annual reporting elements, such as an estimation or calculation of pellet loss. So we are really working hard in order to be able to show not only, to show a bit a picture of the improvements of the industry over the years as of 2022. In terms of objectives, the certification scheme, as I said, will be ready by the 1st of January 2022. And for Plastics Europe, our aim is to have 100% of our members externally audited and therefore certified by the end of 2024. And that's it for me. So thank you very much for your attention, and feel free to sign up to the program if you're a company handling plastic pellets. You have there the European website again, so feel free to reach out also if you have any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think we've got time for one question before we move on to our next speaker. Let's just have a look what everyone is saying. So how long will it take for a company to get certified?
Well, basically, as I said, the scheme will be ready by 2022. Of course, by 2022, the scheme will be ready, but there will be also the need to train, some auditors and so on. But once their usual auditor is ready, all the company will have to do is just request for an external audit. And in terms of availability of both the company and the auditor, a meeting will be done, and we expect that it will be half a day or maximum 1 day to have the external audit going on, and then the discussion, but it should be not more than half a day.
Great, thank you. We're now going to move on to our next speaker, who is Peano from Quantis, who will be speaking on the plastic leak project, how to quantify plastic leakage within your organization.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. So, hello everyone. I'm going to introduce you to the plastic leak project guidelines. I was a part of this project in 2019. I was leading actually the plastic leak project. And before starting, maybe some numbers about the plastic leakage. So the best estimate that we have today from our scientific experts is that every year about 3% of the annual plastic production is discarded in the environment. And this is surprising to people that it's just 3%, but actually we have to think about that this number, this 3%, corresponds to about 10 million tons of plastic per year, which is a huge amount. It corresponds to, just to give you an idea, to about 300,000 trucks of plastics entering into the ocean every year. And of that, about 8 million tons per year are macroplastics, which are visible plastics, meaning plastic that is bigger than 5 millimeter, while 1.5 million tons per year are microplastics, which are microparticles smaller than 5 millimeter. In this context, consumers and investors expect businesses to take actions, and companies are making commitments. You have on this slide an example of such commitment, so from Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the global commitment, but they lack the tools that they need to translate these commitments into actions. Current life cycle assessment, which is a key tool that companies can use to assess the environmental impacts of their products and business, doesn't account for plastic as a pollutant, meaning businesses can't really identify when or where the plastic leakage is happening. And that's why, so we decided to launch in 2019 this project, the PlasticsEurope project. While speaking with our clients and partners, many of them had this shared need. They wanted to map, to measure leakage in their value chain so that they could take meaningful actions and track progress, which is also important to see whether the actions that you plan are good enough or not. So together with EA, that is our partner, a long-term partner or expert in plastic waste, we gathered 35 stakeholder organizations that you can see here on this slide. You can see among them we had many companies coming from different sectors: food, apparel, chemical, tires, but we had also industry associations like PlasticsEurope. We had also European Bioplastic Association and the European Tires Association. And we had other advisors from government and from other international organizations. The goal was really to work 1 year together to define a methodology, so what we call the PlasticsEurope project guidelines, the PLP guidelines, let's say, to help really companies to track this plastic leaking into the environment. So in 2020, we published these guidelines. First, this is a public available methodology. It means that you can go on our website, on the Quantis website, you can download this document for free. You will download together with the guidelines also a set of data that will help you to apply these guidelines. And the goal is really to have a document that can allow the industry to identify, to quantify the amount of plastic leaking along the value chain of a company or of a product. So it's possible to do both kind of assessment by applying this document. And we wanted also, most importantly, to have really to define a kind of methodology that is metrics based. So really that allows you indeed to apply metrics, numbers, when speaking about plastic leakage. The PLP guidelines help quantify the kilogram, the gram, or the ton of plastics from different sources and pathways. Among these sources, for instance, there is you will be able, the user is able to quantify the amount of microplastics that are leaking during the textile washing, for instance, or during the transportation because of the tires abrasion, or again the amount of macroplastics that are released during the end of life of a product in a specific country, or also the amount of microplastics that is released during the polymer production because really of the pellets losses. We provide in these guidelines some data. We always say whenever the company has a primary data, specific data, it's better to use such data. In case where we are speaking about brands owners or companies that maybe don't have all the data for the different steps, they can use some data coming from the guidelines. These are all numbers that are coming from public available literature, scientific articles, scientific reports that were discussed together with the partners. And the goal for us was really to provide the most reliable numbers, actually. And then in terms of pathways, it's possible also to identify where this plastic is leaking. So whether it's leaking in the ocean, for instance, or also in the soil, in the river, because everyone is speaking about marine pollution today, but we have also taken into account that there is a certain amount of plastic that ends up in the soil, for instance, and can reach the ocean only after many, many years. And so that's why it was important for us to identify the different environmental compartments where we can find plastic. So what does it mean concretely for corporations? It means that companies will be able to answer these questions that you can see on this slide by doing a plastic leakage assessment. First, in the key results, you will identify what is the total leakage along your value chain. Then, where this leakage is happening and in which country. And you can also dig deeper, so you can also understand what market is responsible for it, which are the products and polymers contributing to this leakage. The goal is really with these last questions to help companies to identify the right eco-design actions to reduce the leakage. We have tested the PLP guidelines both at corporate level with Arla Foods and for one product, a jacket, together with Sympatex. And both case studies are publicly available. They are present directly in the guidelines, but you can find them also on our website directly under the case studies section if you want to check. I'm going to today to show you just a few results for Arla Foods. And so I'm going to show you the answer to two of these questions that you can see now on the screen. So Arla Foods is a dairy company, and one of the questions that we answered was, where does the leakage occur along Arla's value chain? We consider the full life cycle for Arla, and for each of the steps, we quantified the amount of plastic that is leaking into the environment. These results depend on, of course, the amount of packaging that Arla is using, what kind of packaging they are using, what kind of polymer, in which country, and also, of course, they depend on some data that we call them secondary data coming from the PLP guidelines that are based on scientific articles and scientific literature. And we identified that in the case of Arla, the hotspot was clearly the product end of life. It's where really we had the highest amount of plastic, macroplastics, leaking into the environment. And then we decided to focus on this step. And for this step, for the end of life, we answered this question: in which country does the leakage occur? And for Arla, it was, the main market, sales market for Arla is Europe, in particular UK and Germany. These are really the two countries where they are selling most of their products. The European countries in general, they have a leakage that is lower than of the African or Asian countries, but still there is a certain amount of plastic still that is leaking even in Europe. But for Arla, it was surprising. It was quite, really a surprise to find out that the most of really the highest amount of the macroplastics was was in Nigeria and in Bangladesh. I say that it was surprising because yes, Arla is selling some of their products in these countries, but clearly these are not their biggest sales markets. And so after this, on the basis of these results, Arla decided to put in actually to improve the recycling facilities in these two countries, Bangladesh and Nigeria, so that to contribute to improve these recycling facilities. So they invest some funds in these countries, and it was a way for them really to define actions that are really related to their value chain actually. And also they defined some commitments on plastic pollution that were more based on metrics rather than just assumptions. Then, so this is my last slide, and so now the PLP guidelines are out, and what we are doing is really to apply these guidelines. We are working with our clients to apply these guidelines. And we're excited actually to get to work and to guide companies on a meaningful action plan to tackle plastic pollution. And so this is really, I'm not saying that the PLP guidelines are a perfect tool, but this is the best available tool that we have today to actually quantify the amount of plastic that is leaking into the environment in association to a specific value chain. What we miss in the PLP is actually we cannot quantify then what's the environmental impact of such macro and microplastics. So what's really the impact on the biodiversity, or what's the impact on the human health? But no one can do this today. Still, there is a project that is called MARI LCA, which has been launched, but it will be probably finished by 2025. So today we don't have any available tool to assess the environmental impacts of this plastic pollution, but at least what we can do is to try to find to fix actions to reduce our contribution to plastic leakage by taking these actions based on metrics, on numbers, rather than assumptions, thanks to the PLP guidelines. So I encourage you to go on our website to download the guidelines. And now I think that we have some minutes for questions.
Yes, thank you, Laura, for that presentation. We've got a question that's come through here that asks, how do you think COVID-19 has affected the different sectors' plastic pollution leakage, and how could this affect the solutions to the problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I think that for sure, COVID has had an impact on plastic pollution. I mean, we had increased the use also of plastic materials like masks, but like gloves, plastic gloves, and other materials that are used by everyone every day, actually, in our daily life. And for instance, we also see more and more in the environment these plastic masks that are really thrown in the natural environment. So I think that yes, it has had an impact. I read also some articles, by the way, on this. Now I think it's quite early also to say exactly what's the impact of COVID on our plastic pollution. This is something that we will see, yes, but in the future, in some years. And but for sure, there are already some articles, scientific articles, saying that indeed we can find now more plastic masks and other plastic protecting materials in the ocean, and so that probably yes, COVID had a strong impact on plastic pollution.
Great, thank you so much. I think we've got a few more questions, but Laura will be able to answer them offline for you. For now, we want to thank you for your attention so far, and we're just going to take a 10-minute tea and coffee break. So if everyone would like to return at 3:10, we will continue our presentations then. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to continue the rest of the webinar. Next up, we have 3 speakers. We have Sarah Denney from LyondellBasell, Luca Marazzi from Thames 21, and Mike Duddy from Mersey River Trust, who will be speaking on monitoring microplastics in the River Mersey. And we have Mike Duddy, who will be presenting first.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mike Duddy. I'm a senior project manager with the Mersey Rivers Trust. I'd like to talk to you this afternoon about our plastic-free Mersey project, looking at pathways of macroplastics in the River Mersey. I'm going to start off proceedings. I'll be followed by my partner Luca Marazzi from Thames 21, and then Sarah Denney from LyondellBasell. Some of you were presented before to the British Plastics Federation, so some of you will have heard a couple of these slides before, but I would like to introduce the project to you, to some of you, and give you an update in general as to where we're up to with the project. So if you just slip to the next slide, please. Thank you. The Mersey Rivers Trust, we're part of a national group of rivers trusts. We focus on the Mersey catchment. We're a small environmental charity focusing on the ecology of the rivers in the Mersey catchment. We work with government agencies, local authorities, businesses and the general public to improve water quality and nature in general. If you just slip to the next slide. Thank you. As you can see on the map on the bottom right of the screen, the Mersey catchment is based in the northwest of England. Surprisingly, 2/3 of it is rural. And only 1/3 is city, residential and industrial use, but we do have a massive historic legacy in our part of the world from the Industrial Revolution, and there's a history of polluted waterways. However, in the last 20 years, we've seen a massive, incredible recovery of nature in our areas, in our rivers, and in our seas, and in our trees and fields, parks, gardens, etc. We can flip to the next slide. I'm rattling through them. The River Mersey, believe it or not, consists of 23 quite large tributary rivers. The general area is 4,700 square kilometres. The Mersey itself and its main tributary is 110 kilometres long, and in the region is 5 million people live in the area. That gives us a tremendous audience for knowledge sharing and community engagement. If you just skip to the next slide. Despite being 2/3 a rural area, in my job I focus on urban Manchester, urban Warrington and urban Merseyside. There are tremendous ongoing issues that we face when we're looking at water quality and river health, around pollution, litter, historic sediment, still trapping massive amounts of heavy metals and pollutants. And obviously, as the built environment changes, we're suffering again from climate change and new elements of risk around flooding. We could skip on again. So despite all of the self-congratulation that we previously engaged in around improving water quality so that salmon will return to the Mersey rivers and humpback whales occasionally return to the Mersey estuary, there's been a tremendous cleanup of the Mersey as a river system. However, in recent years, especially since 2015, the issues of the more modern form of pollution around microplastics has come to the fore after fantastic research from the geography department at Manchester University. They discovered very high concentrations of microplastics, not only in the Mersey, but also in all of the tributary rivers. And it's something that's taken a little bit of time for academics and ecologists like me to get our heads around. Obviously we know that they're there. Where are they coming from? Why? So our new project, if we just flip to the second part of this screen, I think there is one. Yeah, there we go. Our project that we're working on in partnership now as part of this Plastic-Free Mersey project, we're looking at macroplastics. We're looking at how the macroplastics are arriving from industry, from general consumers through litter. So we're trying to record the pathways of contamination, how individual items of plastic are arriving in the river environment. And we're encouraging research and global action on how we can tackle this, but we're going to be a learning base and an action base here in the Northwest to tackle. We're obviously working with our partners, with LyondellBasell and obviously Thames 21. So I'm going to pass over now to Luca Marazzi from Thames 21, who's going to further expand on how we're going to go about doing this.
Thank you, Mike. It is a great pleasure to have recently joined Thames 21 as project coordinator to harness people's power and work to fulfill our collective dream of having plastic-free rivers in the UK and elsewhere in the world in the future. Our charity employs about 40 people and work with 7,000 committed volunteers to improve the health of rivers for wildlife ecosystems and people's well-being. We want to create and multiply positive change across the whole of society. Next, please. The Plastic-Free Mersey project will build on the successful Thames River Watch project that has been running for 6 years now and has won a Dragon Award and an Evening Standard Business Award. This flagship project has highlighted the plight of wet wipes and other sanitary items, plastic bags, and bottles accumulating in huge numbers on the Thames foreshore. And it spurred the movement of volunteers, for example, through the Big Count on the tidal Thames that takes place annually in spring. Next, please. Our project goals are to survey and remove plastics along the course of the River Mersey, doing so while educating, engaging, and empowering a diverse pool of citizen science volunteers in close collaboration with the Mersey Rivers Trust. We want to preach out of the choir and gather interest and support as wide as possible. We are using a holistic approach that brings together industry and university partners, charities and local communities to create change and leave a lasting legacy. And our business partners, LyondellBasell, Innovin, and other companies that we hope will support our efforts in the future, will help us involve their employees and their contacts as volunteers. Next, please. We know that both microplastics and microplastics can be harmful for wildlife in rivers and in the ocean. This project's focus will be on macroplastics such as bottles, bags, and many other plastic items that get fragmented by water, UV radiation, and other environmental factors and turn into microplastics. And these are the secondary microplastics that another speaker referred to. We're exploring and developing methods to enable citizen scientists to collect a range of data from riverbanks as well as in the water column and in areas where litter gets trapped in the vegetation, especially in the summer. And this is a 2020 very nice publication by a young Dutch scientist who knows a lot about these issues. Next, please. And the sources of plastic litter include leakage from industry and consumers and accumulation on riverbanks and elsewhere. And so to reduce plastic pollution in the ocean, we as a society need to understand the problem at source in water catchments and seek behavior change, law enforcement, and community empowerment. Our role as a charity can help us go beyond raising awareness because human beings are quite good at making excuses for not doing what we know we should do. But we do need other sectors of society to come on board and do their part. For example, on education and law enforcement, local, regional, and national government can do a lot. So I look forward to hearing from you to exchange ideas and potentially work together towards plastic-free rivers in the future. And I will pass now on the slide presentation to Sarah Denney, who works with the LyondellBasell, one of our chief funders. Thank you.
Thanks, Luca. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Sarah Denney, and I'm in the Corporate Sustainable Development Department at LyondellBasell. We're a global chemical, fuel, technology, and of course, polymer company. And we have been engaged in the issues of fighting plastic waste for quite some time, some years. And today I would like to just talk to you about why we're involved in this project and how you may also get involved if you choose to support such an initiative as this. We're very excited about it, and I guess our enthusiasm has started a couple of years ago, particularly supporting this sort of project as a co-founder of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And now we would like to work more locally in the Mersey region, where we have 2 sites, and to advance this issue. So I guess we've all seen images and footage of plastics in waterways, plastic soup. But I guess it was really highlighted to me at a recent plastic seminar, plastic waste in the environment seminar, that although about 80% of waste in the ocean, plastic waste, originates from land-based sources, only about 13% of academic studies focus on that plastic in the river, as opposed to studies focusing on the ocean. So I think there really is some work to do. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight, could we go to the next slide, please? So I just wanted to show you what we're doing in this study. We would be looking at how much and where plastics are being found across the Mersey catchment area, and looking at an analysis of how they would degrade as well. We'll be focusing on plastics that you can pick up and see with your hand and see, and therefore there'll be no microplastics involved in the study. We'll be working with citizen science volunteers, as Mike and Luca were just mentioning, and as well as for companies who are members of the project, our own employees, if we would like to get out and get involved in our local communities. We'll be starting right at the top of the Mersey and working our way right down through to the estuary, under the watchful eye of the Geography Department, Jamie Woodward, at the University of Manchester, as well as under the watchful eye of Mersey Rivers Trust as the local experts in the area. So our committed volunteers will come from people who are members of the community, as well as I was saying, from our companies. Next slide, please. So what does the project look like? So the key groups are shown here at the top, with Thames 21 and Mersey Rivers Trust and ourselves, and even co-chairing. And then we have our institutional supporters with Manchester University and PlasticsEurope, and of course thanks to BPF as well. One thing that we really were excited about is the collaborative nature of this project, being going right across the supply chain. So we're looking for potential members who are not only polymer producers like ourselves, but also the brand owners, converters, recyclers, and also infrastructure or service providers such as waste management, utilities, or transport companies as well. And we think if all goes well in this project, we would like it to act as a potential pilot, and that can be expanded to either other rivers in the UK or into potentially across to European rivers as well. Next slide, please. So, so at the moment we are envisaging it'll run for 2 years. It'll be funded by the members, so the more the merrier. And at the moment, we are just having discussions with new members prior to the launch event in the next couple of months. we are just finalising our methodology development for the citizen science surveys, and prior to launch then we'll be starting to get people trained up and increasing our recruitment. So if you would like to be somebody who is joining up on this project to really advance this river science, I'll just show you on the next slide. You can get in touch with us. You can get in touch with Luca or Adela at BPF, or Andrew Brown or myself at LYB as well. So with that, I think we'll go across to some questions.
Yes, thank you guys. So we've got a few questions here. So the first one is, will this work also concentrate on reducing all litter from entering our waterways? It seems the 4 steps mentioned would reduce all litter.
Mike, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I was just about to answer that. Yeah, absolutely, yes. So, I mean, whilst the primary focus of the project is to look at macroplastics, we're absolutely looking at all pathways of general litter as well. And obviously we work with our local authority partners here in the northwest of England, where we come across, say for example, fly tipping hotspots. We get in touch with local environmental health teams and make them aware of that so they can be monitored in that respect. Because obviously not all river pollution is plastic. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great, thank you. I think that's all we've got time for, but we have got a few more questions, so I'm sure that you guys will be able to answer them offline individually. But I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Katrin Schuhen from Wasser 3.0, who will be speaking on the removal of microplastics and micropollutants from various waters.
Katrin, we can't hear you. Katrin, we can see your slides, but we can't hear you.
No?
Hello, yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, perfect. All right. So I made it. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk about Wasser 3.0. My name is Katrin Schuhen. I'm the founder, CEO, and the inventor behind Wasser 3.0. We are a startup founded in 2020 in Karlsruhe in Germany, and our main topic is the removal of microplastics and micropollutants from various waters. So for us, the starting point is microplastics, and for us, is the starting point the chemistry behind. And I want to take you to a journey to the solution, how we can solve a global environmental problem caused by microplastics. And I think, yes, here we are. As everybody knows, this microplastics problem is extremely huge. It's not only just a word, it's a really uncontrolled and uncontrollable topic from research side, because everybody's doing in their niche what they can do, but nobody's doing it on a platform controlled and supervised and directly related to laws and to regulations. And this leads to a huge problem when you start to solve, or if you have the solution in hand to solve this global environmental problem, because you need the game changers to start with solving and not just to do the detection or not just to do recycling. We at Wasser 3.0 combine all the different stakeholders in a systemic view, holistic approach to form a large platform where all the stakeholders interact to solve a global environmental problem caused by microplastics. Because we have this problem now. We do not have it in the future. It's not an estimation that we will have it in the future. We have this problem now. We know about the problem. We have research data in hand, not coherent at the moment. This is the main problem, but we have data in hand that microplastics are risky for health and the environment. So the big question is how we can start. So it's absolutely clear that we need solutions. And the thing is, there are solutions, but they need to be implemented from the early adopters. One solution I want to show you today is the solution from Fouriau. Here we use hybrid silica gels to clump and skim microplastics together. As you can see, we have a microplastics in waters. At the beginning of our research, we started in wastewater, then we moved to process water, then we moved to seawater, and now we are in more complex process water with an additional side effect on water reuse to make sure that we always see a microplastics removal and a positive effect on the water quality. And as you see here in the last picture of this short video, the particles we clump together with our hybrid silica gel mixture are floating on the surface. And this is completely new to the techniques that are state of the art and on the market, because most of the microplastics removal technologies are on filtration concepts or reverse osmosis. For drinking water, membrane filtration and reverse osmosis works perfectly. The drinking water quality with respect to microplastics is perfect. But for the large quantities of waters, like in processes, in industries, or in the wastewater treatment plant, we need solutions to make sure that they are not that cost intensive, that they can easily be used, and that they show a removal efficiency with a positive effect on planet and people first. And by using a non-filtration technology, you have the chance to remove the particles from the surface. And with this chance of removing the particles from the surface, you get various positive effects because it's a chemically based process, but you do not leave residues in the water. So it's a soul gel process. We are from the bottom of our hearts in the team chemists, so we know by heart about water and chemistry, and about green chemistry. And with the hybrid silica gels, we have a residue-free water in the end of our microplastics removal, and we have a process which we can control pH independent, and which we can control independent of polymer types and of other pollutant concentrations. Because most of industries, like food and beverage, for example, use, for example, in the bottle washer, lots of tensites to clean the bottles, but you have on the labels microplastic particles released to the water. And here, a removal of microplastics directly in the process leads to the chance to reuse the water, reduce the amount of tensites as well, and to protect the water cycle from microplastics, protect the environment from pollutants overall, and to make sure that you can reuse the water. So it's a water saving system. And as you might see, the process was really easy to install. So you just need a steroid, just need a hybrid silica gel to add and make sure that you have a complete reaction. And this is possible if you have a detection in hand, where you can control the removal process. And here our strategy, detect, remove, reuse, comes to forefront, because here we can, with the detection, detect the microplastic concentration in the water. With the removal, we can remove them, and then we reuse the particles where we skim out. And this strategy, detection, removal, and reuse, leads to a contribution to circular economy. And then polymer chemistry becomes a completely new site from the environmental scientists. They see polymers and plastics as enemies, but they are not. I've been working at LyondellBasell for a couple of years, and I made lots of polymers during the production. And I know about the process, and I know about how important plastics are for us and for our livings on Earth. But the problem is, if we do not care about the end of the life cycle or close the loop, this always runs into problems. And here we close the loop with the reuse step, because we take the agglomerates, which we put out of the process, to put them as construction materials in new processes and close the loop in a secondary treatment step. And this is a clean process. This does not lead to wasting resources or fossil resources, and this helps to really go further in implementing the solutions. As a non-profit company like Fouriau, we are focusing on the SDGs and the contribution to SDGs, which means that our technologies first have planet and people, and the profit is the third P, but far behind. So our positive effects are the impact which we can directly measure. If we reduce the amount of microplastics in water, we have the positive effect on planet and people. By removal or increasing the removal efficiency, we increase the waste to a resource site, and this helps us to increase the circular economy contribution. And in the end, if you reuse the water and reduce the amount of chemicals needed for some specific industrial processes, you have the chance to directly save costs. So in the end, you have lots of positive effects, but this is only possible if you work in networks, because networks help to directly spread solutions, networks help to improve, and networks bring the data together. And this is what we do at Fouriau. We are active in various platforms and networks to directly bring our data from publications, open source, to the people, talk about setting up solutions with the non-profit holistic strategy first, and to make sure that we set up solutions which work and have a positive effect on planet and people. And this is what Fouriau is all about. We know that we have a solution in hand, but we cannot do it on our own. We do not want it on our own. If we combine the energy, we can really improve the water quality and set up positive effects on the ecosystem. Thank you very much. And now I'm open for any kind of questions from the auditorium.
Thank you, Katrin, for that insightful talk. We've got a couple of questions here. So first question is, can the WASA 3.0 process be operated in a continuous setup, or is it always batch?
No, you can set up a continuous setup. This depends on the amount of water which needs to be treated. For the wastewater treatment plant, you run normally continuous flow. At the moment, we do it in a side stream because we have to make sure that we have a complete detect, remove, reuse setup for the side stream, and then we scale up to the full stream. And for the industrial processes, it depends on the amount of water which needs to be treated during time. So the scalability behind is that you first look, what's the problem? Is there another problem beside microplastics? Do they want to reuse the water? Are there side effects which have to keep in mind? Space is always a real big problem. And what about the waste? And if you do this, you can run batch or continuous, whatever you want.
Great. We've got another question here. Have you looked at the LCA of this process, and what is the percentage by weight of sol gel of recovered microplastics?
So at the moment, we're running the localization, which means that we localize the microplastic particles in our reactor. This is a step which helps us to only add the hybrid silica gel when it's needed. So we have no waste of hybrid silica gel. And with our detection, inline detection, which is now set up for the pilot plants, we have the chance to control the concentration in our reactor, in the localization, in our tromba or tornado, like everybody say. Here we have a localization and the process control, and then we add the hybrid silica gel. So it's not a per cubic meter dosing, it's a per microplastic pollutant dosing. And so this is completely turned around to the actual processes in wastewater treatment, where you just add something, and we do it the other way around.
Great, thank you so much. We have got a couple more questions, but unfortunately we ran out of time, so we'll be able to send you them and you can answer them offline.
Great.
So great, thank you. So next we have Justin Wood from Alliance to End Plastics Waste, who will be providing an overview of their projects.
Great, thank you very much, Grace, and hopefully you can all hear me well. So I'm just going to share a little bit about the organization and the projects that we are aiming to build around the world. So the context for the Alliance is what you can see on the screen here, and I won't go into depth because I think many speakers have already covered it, but three, I think, points to raise. One is that we already face a very serious environmental challenge given the amount of plastic that's already leaking into the environment. The second point, I think, is that when you look to the future, most forecasts are that this plastic challenge we face, this plastic waste challenge, is going to get a lot worse unless we take significant action today to get in front of it. And I think the third point is that it's not just an environmental challenge, it's also an economic challenge, because I think many studies have shown that plastic waste is a very valuable resource, and yet most of us today are not capturing this value and keeping it in the economy. It's either being burnt or buried or dumped into the environment. So the Alliance to End Plastic Waste was really put together to try to get ahead of this problem. We were launched in January 2019. There were 27 founding CEOs that came together, recognizing the scale of the challenge and wanted to try to really pioneer a new approach to getting in front of it. They set a goal to raise $1.5 billion that could be used to invest into, to support projects pioneering new ideas and new approaches to this challenge. It was set up on a couple of key principles. First of all, I think we have to act now because the problem is getting worse if we don't. It has to be based on collective action. No one organization, no business, no government on their own can do this. It needs everyone to work together. And that collective action needs to be on a cross-value chain basis. It needs to be right from the top, the producers of plastic, through the users, the waste managers, the recyclers, and so on. And then the fourth principle is that we wanted to be a do tank rather than a think tank. When you look around the world, there are a huge number of initiatives doing deeply valuable work around policy analysis, thought leadership, awareness raising, and so on. And we wanted the Alliance to be able to build on all of that great work and to take the best ideas being produced from that and to try to really invest real money into real solutions. So really focused on action. There are a few principles that govern the sorts of projects that we look for when we're looking to invest our money. First of all, they have to be sustainable. And I don't mean just environmentally sustainable, we mean economically sustainable. So when we invest into a project, it has to be able to fund itself rather than rely on our funding into the future. Second of all, it has to be scalable because the size of this problem is huge. And our money at 1.5 billion, although it's a lot, is really tiny compared to what's needed to really address this problem properly. So we want to invest into new ideas that demonstrate new solutions, new pathways that can then be scaled and replicated by others. The third is about being catalytic. And again, recognizing that our money is somewhat limited, we want to be able to crowd in funding from other sources as well to invest alongside us into some of these new solutions. And then the fourth principle for our project selection is around being circular. We are fully focused on trying to build a circular economy for plastic. That's idealistically where we want to get, but we do recognize the need to also be pragmatic. And a fully circular economy is our end goal, but it's hard, it's expensive, in many cases yet not proven. So we will invest into interim solutions whilst we develop those fully circular answers. So far, we have raised $1 billion of our 1.5 target, and we've grown our community from 27 companies to 62 now. So the alliance is growing and raising significant amounts of money. These are some of the organizations which are involved. It is fully cross-value chain. So we have the resin producers like LyondellBasell and BASF and Dow. We have the converters like Berry and Sealed Air, consumer goods companies like PepsiCo and Procter & Gamble, the waste managers like Suez and Veolia, and all the others. So it is deliberately cross-value chain in the composition of the companies that are funding our work and getting behind this. What about our strategy? So when we think about the types of projects that we're looking to fund, and I should stress that we ourselves don't actually run the projects. We have a team of about 40 people with deep expertise from all aspects of the plastic value chain. We invite third parties to submit project ideas to us. We assess those ideas, we shape them, develop them, and then we fund them and govern them. But it's third parties that do the actual implementation on the ground. And when we're looking at what sort of projects we want to invest into, we think of gaps that we have identified in what would be a circular economy. And I think on this slide here, you can see what's a fairly standard conception of a circular economy. And we've identified some of the gaps that we're aiming to address. So if you start in the top right-hand corner, there's the design gap. And this is working with companies to improve the design of materials and products so that they can be more easily recycled and kept within the economy rather than ending up as waste. Then if you move around, there's the quantity gap and the fact that many places around the world are not currently collecting their plastic waste. So we need to make sure we have the collection systems for solid waste in cities and other communities to make sure that we're at very least collecting the plastic, preventing it from leaking into the environment. Moving further around, we have the quality gap, which is about taking that collected plastic waste and trying to improve the sorting of it and the processing of it. So we're looking at improving the sorting technologies in MRFs. We're also looking at new chemical recycling technologies as well as new mechanical recycling technologies. The affordability gap is once you have processed that waste, it tends to be still significantly more expensive than virgin resin. So we're working on projects that can help us to close that pricing gap between recycled plastic and virgin plastic. And then the other two gaps you can see there, one is the data gap, which is of course about trying to improve our understanding of this problem and really measure it properly. And the alignment gap is around building this sort of global movement of companies that sort of think about the problem in the same way and can support projects because they have that shared belief. This is what our portfolio of projects looks like today. We've been around, as I said, since the beginning of 2019, although it took us a good 6 months to get set up. So far, we've invested into close to 30 projects. And those projects that we have set up so far, they're in various stages of implementation. But once they are fully up and running, they are forecast to capture and divert 375,000 tons of plastic from the environment every year. If you look at our pipeline of projects for this year, they are forecast to deliver an additional 500,000 tons. So last year's projects and this year's projects will collectively divert nearly 1 million tons of plastic waste from the environment every year. So let me give you a few examples of the projects that we are funding. This first one is around addressing that quantity gap around collecting plastic waste in the first place. We began with a small investment into a community in Bali in Indonesia in a place called Jembrana. It's a coastal community of 150,000 people. And previously they had no waste collection systems whatsoever. So all of their rubbish was being dumped into their local river, onto the beaches, onto the land. We went in there with some partners we designed a waste management system, including a MRF, collection vehicles, and so on. And importantly, a business model that can fund itself. So we've introduced a household collection fee, $1 a month per household, which is quite significant for some of the households there, but there's a lot of education around it, explaining why this is a valuable thing to do. There's also revenue that comes from the sale of recyclates. And having funded this project in Gimbrana, Project Stop, for a year and a half, we've learned some very valuable lessons around what's worked and what hasn't worked. And we're now taking this project to scale, and we're investing into 3 regencies on the main island of Java in Indonesia, in a place called Malang, Magalang, and Sukabumi. We've called this expansion Bersey Indonesia. Bersey means clean in Indonesian. And this is going to build waste collection systems for 6.5 million people, which will divert over 100,000 tons of plastic waste every year once it is fully implemented. So this is an example of how we're trying to invest at a small scale, demonstrate something, prove it, learn lessons, and then take that experience and really invest at scale to get ahead of this problem. That's an example of the sort of projects we're doing in infrastructure. The second project is one about trying to create value for waste plastic. And we're partnering with an organization called CRDC, the Center for Regenerative Design and Collaboration. And they have developed a very interesting technology that takes plastic waste of all kinds, even the hardest to recycle multi-layer flexible films, for example. And it can take that plastic waste and it can use it as a substitute for sand in the making of concrete. Now, obviously, there are other techniques doing this, but what's interesting about this is that the concrete which is produced has stronger structural qualities and better thermal capabilities than traditional concrete. So we are working with CRDC to fund the expansion of some of their facilities around the world to develop the production of concrete that can really absorb a significant quantity of plastic waste. And what's very important is that the plastic waste used in this concrete doesn't then leak out into the environment over time. The concrete that's being produced can be recycled within the construction industry and used again and again. So that's an example of sort of creating new uses for waste plastic. And then a third type of project that we're investing into is trying to drive new innovation. And clearly, to really address this problem, we are going to need new ideas of the type you've just heard, Wasser 3.0, which was fascinating. We are working with an organization called Plug and Play, which is based in Silicon Valley. They are an innovation innovator. What they do is they identify promising startups, and then they put them on a rapid incubation program for 90 days. They teach them about what they need to be successful from a business perspective. They connect them to established players across the ecosystem within whatever industry it is that they're working. And so we ran a program last year in 3 places, Silicon Valley, Paris, and Singapore, and we're doing it in 3 more places this year, Shanghai, South Africa, and Brazil. Last year, we had just over 2,000 startups in the plastic and packaging space that applied for the program. We picked the 30 most exciting ones, put them on this incubation program, and at the end of it, they got to then pitch their product or their service to the members of our community and indeed to other companies. And of those 30 companies, 12 of them then secured investment and or contracts for the service or the product that they were providing. So we feel this is a very nice way to nurture the next generation of startups that are really driving innovation, research, and new business models and ideas into getting ahead of this plastic space. So let me stop there. That's just a flavor of the types of projects that the Alliance is investing into and the approach that we're taking. Grace, let me hand back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Justin. It's nice to hear the initiatives and the value that plastic waste can actually bring, and that's positive because often plastic does get a bad name. We will be moving on to our next speaker now, who is David Katz from Plastic Bank, and he will be speaking on Can Our Ocean's Greatest Threat Be Humanity's Richest Opportunity?
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. Thank you. I just can't help but feel that there isn't anyone in the world who doesn't want to participate somehow. I haven't met anyone when I've asked them if they want to do something about the ocean, what's happening in the ocean. They've all said someone's got to do something about it. And I think that's always the second conversation. I think the first conversation is, I want to do something about it, but I don't know how. And that's really the premise of the plastic bank here, is putting the power in the hands of every consumer. How might we not have to change behavior and still have great change? We see the great work that the Alliance is doing, and these efforts of bringing people together, and that's really the plastic bank here too. And I always have the expression, if every plastic bottle, if everything that you ever encountered, every piece of packaging, every bottle, we'll metaphorically call it, was worth $5 US or £5 or €5, how many would we see flowing into the environment, into the ocean, into the streams? Well, we know we wouldn't see any. And inside of that paradigm as well, we have to then take our own ownership and say, well, it's not the plastic, it's us. So how might we change the way we view the material? Because it's not the material, it's the way we've been looking at it. We see it as worthless, or have been seeing it as worthless. So how do we change that? Well, the Plastic Bank is a global chain of stores for the poor, operating in Haiti, the Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Egypt, now opening into Thailand, and then Cameroon, and then next year going into Kenya and Tanzania. Our global chain of stores accept plastic garbage as money. And we offer everything from school tuition to medical insurance and cooking fuel and Wi-Fi and clean water and everything else the world's poor need but couldn't afford, using plastic as payment. Inside of all of that is a banking application, as the name should imply. So the more frequently that our collector community, which is in the tens of thousands, collects and returns the material, and the more frequently that they return the material, and the higher quality of the material, and the social circle that they bring in to collect the material, there's a financial inclusion element, which gives them a reliability score, what we would know as a credit rating or credit worthiness. So they have the ability to immediately borrow money and have access to other tools that can help them transcend their own poverty. And with us, it's not just the collectors. Too many people want to talk about collecting material from this this community that has a full-time living with it. And that's not going to be enough for the world at all. We have to be engaged with every single home. And one of our opportunities with the Alliance in Jakarta is to study 3,000 homes that, with us, we'll be able to understand exactly what volume of all material types are in that household. If it's $4 a month or $3 a month, what is the possible reward for that? How might we be able to provide a universal basic earned income? For instance, it should provide a basic level of insurance, illness insurance or death benefit, insurance over tuition, a minimum amount of data, access to cell phone communications, and other things as well. It's really about creating that incentive for every household to look at their material a little bit differently. The same thing that is occurring with us in Egypt, where mothers of the house have not had an opportunity in the past to have a bank account, like much of the world, to be able to be included, to have a sense of security and safety. And so now using the very household material that's being bought is now able to be exchanged for the things that they need, and a sense of savings and the ability to have their own autonomy. Super powerful. One of the things that we do in Haiti is create plastic bank branches at schools. When that community where the population can't afford this tuition because the government doesn't pay for the tuition, $20 a month, inaccessible to hundreds of thousands of children, but now the family can collect plastic and pay for the tuition at the school. Super powerful as well. And then that 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old that we provide an education platform for, we talk about environmental stewardship and recycling and the economy, and they go home and tell their parents, and the parents then bring it to school, and the child then learns as well that stewarding the environment is what ends poverty, which is a powerful and beautiful message. But one of the other globally exponential opportunities that we have is that we've created a program for congregations, and we started off with the Catholic Church because of its structure. We're not faith-based, but we believe this is a very powerful method, is that we encouraged and created programming for every congregation that teaches them same basics about recycling and stewardship and the poor and marine debris. And it encourages the parishioner to not just bring their tithing or offering on Sunday, but to bring their plastic as tithing, so that even the poorest of the poor can participate as well. And it provides a space for that church to have great significance in the community. That's expanding powerfully now in Latin America. We started off with that in Brazil. There'll be a program that we bring into the mosque in Egypt as well. And so we're ultimately a global exchange platform that uses a banking technology that provides a space for the world to look at plastic like money, because that's really what it is. There is inherent value inside of it. However, all the plastic that we collect, we term that social plastic. So social plastic, if you consider that the name of it, like we're trying to powerfully give it the story that it deserves, because when you go to the shelf, you see all that plastic we sell to companies like Henkel or SC Johnson or Hugo Boss or all kinds of others, about 300 customers currently, that take that material, put it in their packaging. So when you go to the shelf and you buy that bottle, it's got social plastic in it, and you take it off the shelf, you'd be working hand in hand with the world's poor to end some poverty and keep plastic from entering the ocean. We've given it a new sense of value, a brand value, so that the consumer, as I mentioned at the beginning, who wants to participate, doesn't know how, now has that power as well. It's kind of closing the bigger loop around plastic. So that, in a nutshell, is what the Plastic Bank is, providing a space for the world to use plastic as money and giving every single consumer in the world an opportunity to participate as well by changing the paradigm of the material, stopping the thought that it is worthless and disposable, and having it viewed as something valuable and powerful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, David. We've got a couple of questions here. One of them is, do you have concerns of child labour and how do you deal with this?
Of course, no question, critically important, oh my goodness, and all of our brands most important as well. And when we look at the root of it, children are being employed because the parents, predominantly in the world, the 95% of children that are employed are employed by the family because the family doesn't have enough for food. So we have to be in a place where the family makes more money. The whole, collecting material, or what other people would call waste pickers, that's a poverty trap. They stay there and they can't escape it, which is why we pay such a high premium on the material. We remove all the layers of middlemen, and we give the opportunity for the family to actually make a income. Now, of course, the application, our algorithm, everything else, looking for aberration, looking for people who may be increasing volumes or high rates of volume increase, we would then flag and then look for to see if they're employing others or what that might look like. We're doing everything we possibly can to steward the family, because we believe the only place that children should work hard is in the school. So there's a lot to do, of course, and we endeavor, and that's our groundwork as well. All of our staff on the ground are really there to make sure that children aren't employed, make sure the ethical nature of the material, make sure that value is transacting into the hands of the poor, making sure that people aren't being degraded or abused. So there's a long task, there's lots to do in it, but our authenticity is to build the value of the family. And when the family can eat, then the child goes to school.
Great, thank you for that, David. We are now going to move on to our last and final speaker of the afternoon. We have Zoe Lenkiewicz from Waste Aid, who will be speaking on tackling plastic waste at source in developing countries.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Super, thank you very much. Thank you to the organisers and as well to the 83 people that are still online, much appreciated. I know it's been a long day, but I've been sort of dipping in and out of the presentations, and they've been really interesting. I was invited to speak at this event a couple of years ago, and so I was delighted to be invited back, firstly because it shows that my presentation wasn't too boring the first time, and secondly because Waste Aid is really on a real growth journey, I suppose, and so it's a really good time for me to be able to speak with you all again. I'm sure many of you here today might have been at this conference 2 years ago. So to those who were, you know, pleasure to be speaking with you again. And to those who weren't, well, you know, it's great to be able to introduce Waste Aid to you today. So thank you very much. I've got, let me just, there we go. Okay, so here's the contents of my presentation. We'll cover why Waste Aid takes the approach that we do, how we work with partner organisations, both kind of UK-based or international-based businesses and institutional donors as well. And then I'll provide you with some case studies towards the end of the presentation. So why waste management? Well, really, I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? I think in the UK, it's so easy to take a waste collection service for granted. We put our bins out on the correct day and they get taken away. But it wasn't really that long ago when we didn't have a waste collection service at all, and people were getting ill and dying of preventable diseases like cholera. And this is what we see happening in developing countries. So while I understand that the point of today's event is to look at how we can tackle and prevent marine plastic pollution, but I suppose Waste Aid sees that as part of a bigger picture. You know, there's no point in just trying to collect plastics from communities in developing countries. We need to be managing all waste, and really the economic argument for doing so is huge. You know, here we go, 9 to 25 million new jobs, up to 15% reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions. And it's also a very, very powerful way to help deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. So the United Nations did a study and found that if you go to a place that's got no waste management service at all, for every dollar or pound that you spend, you get $5 to $10 or pounds back in terms of improved health of the population, you know, reduced pollution and so on. So it's a really worthwhile investment. In terms of delivering the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, we're all over this, from fighting poverty through providing valuable jobs like David Katz was just talking about with their fantastic work at Plastic Bank, through to providing affordable and clean energy with simple recycling techniques, and you know, looking at sustainable cities, some of these mega cities that have got 20 million people and no waste management service. You know, you can imagine the scale of the problem. And so when I see a lot of footage about plastics in the ocean, it's really no surprise when you're more familiar with how people dispose of their waste. And we'll go into that in a minute. I mean, what I see in a lot of places is that people look for, you know, when you've got no alternative other than to dump or burn your waste. I mean, that's a sorry state to be in, to be honest with you. You know, people often end up dumping in dry river beds because that's the common land. So it's not your neighbour's yard, it's the common land. And then of course, when the rainy season arrives, it washes it all away and out to sea. So you know, this is where we are now, I suppose. So about Waste Aid, we were founded in 2015 by a small group of British waste management specialists. I am the sole surviving member from that original team. You know, really pleased to still be here and being part of the development of the organisation. It's a really exciting time. So we work with communities and policymakers in low and middle income countries to introduce and develop locally appropriate waste management and recycling programs to support livelihoods, promote circular economy innovation, so keeping those materials in the loop for as long as possible, and ultimately, you know, providing a much cleaner and healthier environment for young people to grow up in. Our vision is a world where waste doesn't cause harm to people or to the planet, and where people are empowered to recover its value. You know, we work mostly with people at, I suppose, what you would call the bottom of that chain. And so it's really important, you know, again, leaning on what presentation, you know, really working with people, understanding their needs, their preferences, what's going to work best for them, and helping protect their rights and working conditions. So our areas of expertise of our growing team, we provide training and livelihood opportunities. We deliver first step resource management, so getting that waste collected, and preferably collected in a source separated style, so keeping the food waste separate from dry recyclables, so you can really, you know, when everything's mixed together, it's just a disgusting mess, really, isn't it, for want of a better term, and it's really difficult to recover any value from it. So if we can get that material collected separately, then we're onto something, and we can start to look to recover the value and help provide those livelihoods for people who so desperately need them. We foster sustainable social enterprises and programs with the private sector, as well as institutional donors and so on, you know, forming local and global networks. I'm going to be talking a bit about that later on. And then the evidence-based advocacy. Some of you might have seen in the paper over the weekend, the G7 summit. There was a huge e-waste sculpture of the heads of the G7 countries that was delivered in partnership with Waste Aid and a private company from the UK that recycles old electrics. So, you know, we're really keen to push that message out there that waste is not only important from an environmental health perspective, but if we don't get it right, we're really storing up more and more problems for future generations. So now is really the time to address it. Our approach, we always work in partnership. We know, like many of the other speakers today, we can't do it alone. We don't want to do it alone. It's definitely better to work together. So we partner with well-established local groups, as well as businesses from, you know, around the world. We build capacity of the groups that we're working with. We get that cooperation going so that everybody's pulling in the same direction and, you know, having empathy for one another's positions, I suppose, and then developing these circular economy networks and the innovation that comes from those. Our current programs, you can see, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. Some of our project highlights. In Douala in Cameroon, we got funding from UK Aid Match. So back in 2019, we ran a big fundraising appeal, raised close to £100,000, which got doubled by the British government. And there we're working with a local private sector partner to train young local people in the collection, sorting and recycling of different types of plastic waste. In Malawi, we've done a feasibility study, nationwide feasibility study, looking at, you know, what is happening with the waste at the moment. There's no formal waste services really that you could write home about. So all of this waste is ending up on dump sites where people are trying to do basic recycling activities. It's very rudimentary, and they could really do with you know, improving the quality of their activities. So that's something that Waste Aid can really support. And then in Indonesia, in Bali, we had a 12-month project where we worked with 2 different partners. One of them is a small desa, which is like a parish council, which is the level at which waste is managed in Indonesia. So you can imagine how many, I've no idea how many parish councils there are across the country, but it's a big undertaking. And we managed, so they were already collecting waste from the local area, but through working with Waste Aid, they increased their recycling rate from 10% to 90%, which is just astonishing and really shows how much a little bit of investment in infrastructure, a little bit of training can really make a massive difference. And then we've also there developed a training program for marginalised young women to be able to gain employment in some of those big hotel chains down in the south of the country as, you know, zero waste officers, zero plastic to ocean champions and that kind of thing. So going back to the first one that I mentioned in Douala, what we're looking at here is a river. As I mentioned before, quite often people throw their waste into the river because it's common land and because ultimately the monsoon rains will come and wash it all out to sea. Now, the city of Douala is on the Atlantic coast. It's kind of right in the, tucked into the little corner in West Africa. 4 major rivers meet the sea at the Cameroon estuary, and each one of them looks like this. Now, this is dry season. You can actually walk across this plastic. There's so much plastic that's accumulated in these rivers, and it's got mixed in with mud that's then dried over time. So the water is actually still running beneath this layer of plastic that you can walk across. It's really, astonishing and quite daunting to try and take on a challenge like this. But that's exactly what we're there for, and we're determined to make as big an impact as we can. So by March 2022, we'll have collected 24 tons, but I think the bigger output or the bigger outcome is that skills building. We're helping a local business develop that capacity to process as much plastic as possible and to grow, and so that in such a way that when the partnership with Waste Aid comes to an end, they've got a sustainable business enterprise that is just hungry for more and more plastic. While we've been in Cameroon, we've actually been able to secure corporate partnerships as well, 2 more corporate partnerships to further our work here, which is really exciting. Some of the people that we're working with in Cameroon, these are people who they're often young, they're often unemployed. Some of them have university degrees, but because the unemployment rate is so very high, there's very few opportunities for people. So this is, a valuable chance for them to be independent and to be able to support their families. What we're doing in Cameroon builds on what we've been doing in the Gambia over the last couple of years. This project I did speak about at the last event that I was invited to a couple of years ago. So here we're taking LDPE, which is, I don't need to tell the audience here today, but it's the slightly stretchy film plastic that's used for carrier bags and for wrap. So around pallets, around a crate of water bottles, plastic bags were actually banned in the Gambia a few years ago, but LDPE is still ubiquitous. It's just everywhere. There's so much of it. So what we do, we train people, we melt it down. So we're melting it into a liquid, not burning it, just like butter. And then once it's liquid, mixing in sand. It's a very simple process, putting it into these tile molds that you can see in the center. And in the end, you've got a product that's better than the concrete alternative. It can be sold for the same price, they'll last a lot longer, and each tile contains the equivalent of 200 plastic bags, because when it melts down, it goes so much smaller. So it's a really, really powerful pollution prevention mechanism. And here we are again, the young people that we've been working with. So in the Gambia, our participants are made up of young unemployed people, people with disabilities, and older illiterate women. And I've got to say, they've all really thrown themselves at it. They've done so well. It's been really exciting to see. Another different model of project that we've launched recently during the COVID period, actually. So this one is funded by Huhtamaki, big multinational packaging company. And here we're working in 3 middle-income countries, so Vietnam, South Africa, and India. And what we're doing is we are seeking circular economy innovators. So we know in these middle income countries, there already is some waste management and recycling and circular economy activity taking place. And they're doing a great job in many cases. But often the groups are not aware of each other, and they don't know how to access more funding, groups like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, for example. So what we're doing here is we're setting up networks within these countries based around these 3 hub cities, where we're organising events and bringing these stakeholders together, and ultimately it's going to kind of culminate in this Zero Waste Cities Challenge, which closes, I think, in about a week, where we have invited innovators and entrepreneurs in these 3 countries to come forward with their circular economy innovation ideas, and they can win €10,000 and free business mentoring to help bring their innovation up to scale. So that's been really exciting. We've had a fair few, I think 40 or 50 applications already, and we're expecting a flurry to come in over the final week of the competition. And there'll be lots of PR around this. We are running like a Dragon's Den style competition, so it'll be a really interesting one to watch, and fascinating as well to see the different ideas that come from people. So that's my kind of whirlwind tour of where we're up to. I'd just like to, thank the organisers once again. It's always a real delight and pleasure to be invited to come and speak to such an important audience for the topic that we're working in. And we know, especially with what with COVID and Brexit and so many different things happening, the cuts to UK aid, we're really, we are really keen to partner with more businesses that are working in this space, as well as institutional donors and government and so on. As I said at the beginning, we can't do it alone, and we're really open to developing projects in partnerships that help businesses deliver on their ESG commitments, as well as making a really significant and sustainable impact around the world. So yeah, we welcome your contact, and I'm happy to take any questions. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Zoe. I don't think we've got any questions at the moment, but please do send them in, and Zoe will be, I'm sure, more than happy to answer them offline.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Great, thanks, Zoe. And that concludes this British Plastics Federation webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Plastics Europe, and also to thank all the speakers from today for their presentations. Finally, I would like to thank you all for listening and for your questions. And just to let you know, after this webinar ends, a short feedback form will pop up on your screen. If you have 2 minutes, then please do fill this in and give us your views so that we can make the next webinar even better than this one. And with that, thank you all and goodbye.